Hi, I'm Metta Spencer. How's the accelerator on your car? You have any problems there? Today we're going to
No.
talk, not you, not you, Craig. I'm talking to the audience here.
Pardon me.
Craig has a metaphor of a sticky accelerator that he uses to describe the problems that we're having in controlling global warming. And so we're going to talk about, not really about accelerators today, although I think that's relevant, but we're going to talk about global warming as usual, because Craig Smith, who's in California, in Newport Beach, California, is somebody who obsesses very reasonably about global warming. So we're going to pick up our conversation where we left off last time and see what we can make of this very wicked problem, as they call it. Good morning, Craig Smith. How are you?
Good morning, Metta. I'm doing well, and I hope you are staying warm up there in Canada.
Well, no, actually, it's kind of cold today, but I got my heater fixed last night, and I'm all right.
Well, we had 2 nice sunny days in Southern California, but today the rain's on the way, and that's good because we need the rain.
Okay.
But I thank you for having me on your show, and I thank those who are listening in for joining with us too. Metta, previously, when we've talked about global warming, we've discussed latency. And latency, is when there's a delay between cause and effect. The classic example that I know we've used in the past is that of cigarette smoking. So in the US in the mid-1960s, when the Surgeon General's report came out, the consumption of cigarettes started to decline. But it wasn't until 25 years later that the rate of lung cancer in men started to decline. So there was a latent period there where the effects of smoking continued. And
I presume that's because it took them that long to stop, to overwhelmingly become non-smokers. Is that right?
No, I think it is more the biological effects that the growth of tumors and all that.
I see. Oh, so if the damage had already been done, it still takes 25 years for it to appear.
To it appear, yeah.
Okay.
I think the seeds were planted, in other words. But this is a similar situation with global warming. There's some effects that we've planted the seeds for them and they're not going to appear for a while. So I want to try to explain that. What I consider as important as latency is what I've called, as an analogy, the sticky accelerator problem. Try to make this complicated idea more, hopefully, clear. Took me a while to really understand it. But if you go back in time a while, you may recall a few years back, I think in 2007, the car was on Highway 69 in Oklahoma, woman driver with a woman passenger. She turned off the freeway, went down an exit ramp, and to her utter dismay, she couldn't slow down. There's something about the accelerator, it didn't retract. So she put on the brake, she pulled on the parking brake or emergency brake. She left 50, 100-foot long skid marks, but to no avail, crashed the car. Her passenger died and she was seriously injured. I think this was the first incident. It was a Toyota Corolla, by the way. I think this was the first incidence of Toyota's problems with sticky accelerators. But a number occurred after that time. In fact, there was one in Southern California near San Diego that made a lot of news. Anyway, the investigation focused on 2 possible causes. One was the carpet under the driver's side jamming the accelerator, or the other possible cause was some kind of compound or material on the accelerator mechanism that causes it to stick. Well, Toyota tried to kind of just ignore this problem for a while. They didn't investigate it carefully. They didn't report it to the transportation safety authorities, and it created a big problem for them. They ended up with over 400 lawsuits for death, personal injury in the US and Europe, and eventually got a $1.2 billion fine for failure to address this problem. So in a way, you could say, well, what does this have to do with global warming? Well, the point is global warming causes the atmosphere to behave like a car with the sticky accelerator. We just keep accelerating. Our planet just keeps accelerating into a warmer and warmer situation. It's as if we put more glass in a greenhouse so that the temperatures keep rising. So if we stop today emitting greenhouse gases, the problem doesn't go away. The temperatures keep increasing. That's what's hard to understand. The reason for that is because greenhouse gases don't leave the atmosphere immediately. It takes a period of a couple hundred years for carbon dioxide to naturally go away and be absorbed back on the earth and trees and the earth itself. So meanwhile, we're left with this increasing problem. The planet keeps accelerating into unhappy situations. So until we reduce carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, we won't see the Earth's temperature, the ocean's temperature, starting to decline. So this is the second part of the sticky accelerator problem. We don't have a brake. There's no practical or economic ways today to remove carbon from the atmosphere. Let's talk about the methods of so-called carbon capture. And ironically, these are some methods that are being promoted by the fossil fuel companies. There's a lot of research going on into how can we basically suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it underground or store it somewhere where it won't escape. The oil companies would like to believe that we can continue to burn natural gas and oil, and then we'll have this magic method to suck it out of the atmosphere. Well, today there's a lot of research going on, small pilot projects. And from the studies, it looks like it would cost about $100 per ton of carbon dioxide removed by one of these processes. Again, this is very preliminary because nobody's done this on anything approaching the scale that would be necessary. So if you use that number and determine how much it would cost to remove 1 part per million from the atmosphere, it's about $1 trillion. Mm-hmm. Now today, as we know that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 415 parts per million. And we basically need to get that back down to about 300 parts per million, or the concentration that was following the Industrial Revolution before we started pumping huge amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So to do that, you can see that that would be $115 trillion. And that's just the cost of removal. There's another cost, which today is not well known because we don't really know what's going to work, is the cost of pumping it or compressing it and storing it underground, building pipelines, whatever is necessary, and having a secure method of storing it underground. Mm-hmm. Now, there's been a lot of talk about storing radioactive waste underground, and that's not gone anywhere, unfortunately. So it does make one wonder, well, how are we going to be able to store this gas underground and not have it leak back into the atmosphere? I mean, every day there is examples of natural gas pipelines and so on are leaking. So that's another part of the problem that has to be solved. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to do this or that we shouldn't not do the research. I think we should do everything we can think of. The other things that we can do, of course, are plant trees, plant billions of trees, change our agricultural practices to absorb more CO2 in the ground and in farmlands and ranch land. We should do those things immediately also. But, trees, before they reach their full carbon capture potential, it's 10 or 20 years of growth. So even that's not going to have an immediate effect. So all things considered, wouldn't you think that the best thing to do would be to just quit emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere today?
The answer is yes. So I agree with you. But now go on, because you've got some more points to make.
Well, no, I'd be happy to have you comment on anything.
Well, I told you I was going to argue with you today because I don't like this sticky accelerator metaphor, because you say there isn't any practical or affordable way to start taking stuff out of the atmosphere or putting it away, sequestering it. And I mean, there are lots of ways of doing it. Some of you may not like, but I think that it's not right to say there's nothing available and that they're necessarily all that expensive. And the main one, of course, from my point of view, is agriculture, because I just looked up some things about it, and I don't want to quote numbers because I'm really bad at numbers, except to say that the best estimate is that we could take out, with really good methods of agriculture, which is just simply to undo the effects that we've done, the harmful effects we've been doing with bad agriculture, such as plowing and things like that. But if they did really good optimum agriculture, we could sequester the equivalent of between 2 and 5 years emissions with just good, better practices of agriculture. And the point is that we need to do that anyway, even if we didn't have any climate problem. We would still need to do it because we're ruining the soil. And there, Jim Hansen just approved of an article that said within 60 years, the Earth's soil is going to be so bad we won't be able to feed the planet. So we have to start capturing carbon and putting it back in the soil and keeping the soil more fertile and taking better care of it. So all of the things that work to reduce global warming, and I call it reduction because it's actually removing it from the atmosphere and putting it underground where it can stay for a number of years. That in itself is really worth doing, and it's not certainly isn't a silver bullet. It cannot be adequate to completely eliminate the problem of global warming by a long shot, but it's very important and very helpful. And my point of view is that, and I'm not alone, because now the IPCC says the same thing, that just reducing global emissions is not enough. We have to go do that and some more. We have to actually remove carbon from the atmosphere, and not only trees, and we need at least a trillion trees. And you're right, it takes a long time for them to grow, and it's very daunting. But the agriculture thing is not that difficult. because farmers are seeing by themselves that they can't produce the food that they used to, and they're desperate, and they're looking for ways of improving their agriculture, and so, and not only that, but corporations are realizing that they have to buy food from farmers, but require them to use better methods. So I think the agriculture thing is the most promising thing, but it's not the only thing. Now, if you want to go farther out, there are not only trees and agriculture, but there's you could sprinkle filings, iron filings in the ocean. Now that's cheap, boy. That you know, between the two of us, we could pay for enough iron filings to do the job. You know, just, you know, some tons of iron filings. You sprinkle it around in the parts of the ocean where there is a shortage of iron. There are parts of the ocean that are almost like deserts because they don't have enough iron. So what you do is you sprinkle that stuff there. You get a huge bloom of phytoplankton within just a few weeks. And then half or more of the phytoplanktons sink to the bottom of the ocean, and they take with them the CO2 that they have absorbed from the atmosphere during the few weeks when they were there. Now, you do that, and you can really make a big difference. There's a lot of ocean out there and a lot of space where there's, and that actually does things to improve the fisheries and so on, because you've got phytoplankton that the fish can eat and whales or whatever. So there's that. And then there's, if going farther afield, there's rock weathering, you know, because the rocks, there are many kinds of rocks that absorb CO2 if exposed to it. And you could take that and powder it, take those rocks and powder them, sprinkle them on crops, and it will improve not only the productivity of the soil, but it will absorb a lot of CO2 and hold it for a long time. I don't think it's economically feasible from what I've read, but what could be economically feasible, as I understand it, is that miners, when they dig a hole in the mine, they bring up this stuff and they have to put it someplace, the dirt from down underneath. They big piles of tailings of whatever soil or rock they brought up. And usually the top layer of that gets hard because it absorbs the CO2. But down underneath, it's not exposed, and therefore it's still useful. We could take those big piles of tailings and sprinkle them on soil, and that would, for a very low price, absorb some. Now, it's not a lot, but it's worth doing. And then okay, well, that's just enough to give you a reason why I say, oh, and there's biochar too, because if we take biochar from, all the cardboard boxes that Amazon is delivering to my house nowadays, you know, just, or the sewage, or, all of the junk that contains organic matter, make biochar into it and put it in the soil. It not only enriches the soil, but it will contain and retain that carbon underground for 1,000 years. Now, maybe there's not enough stuff, corn stovers, or, I mean, like, turkey feathers, places where they process chickens and turkeys, and they have a lot of leftover junk that can be used to make biochar. And it's not a lot in terms of the amount of emissions that we're putting out from all of these, fossil fuels, but it's enough to really make a difference. You can't really say that there's no cheap, practical, effective way at all of actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere and sequestering it, because there is, and maybe not enough, but we ought to use it, and we have to use it, because just cutting the emissions is just not going to be enough. So there. Now I've gotten my points in.
Well, that's all very good, Metta, and I totally agree. I mentioned earlier agriculture. Agriculture is something, as you point out, that we could change quickly. There are changes taking place, but they're not happening very quickly. I know that my wife buys this wonderful breakfast cereal that comes from organic farms, and you pay a slight premium for that. And these are farms that do just what you're talking about in terms of raising wheat and so on. But on the back of the package, it says only 1% of the farms in the United States meets this criteria. So we have a lot of work to do there.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Agriculture, planting trees, we should not hesitate. We should start. But I'm concerned about the time period. Rocks, you're right about that. They weather. That's how limestone is created, by weathering rocks that absorb CO2. But that takes hundreds of years. And again, that begs the point I'm trying to make, in that even if we stop CO2 or all greenhouse gas emissions today, some people think, well, we stop today, then the problem's solved. Well, no, the problem isn't solved. All that gas up there in the atmosphere going to continue to create problems. It's going to continue to cause warming. Warming is cumulative. That's the point. It doesn't stop just because we stop the emissions. So I'm very skeptical of these so-called silver bullets that particularly the oil companies are promoting, because they have this vision that they can use their existing pipelines and so on now to pump CO2 in the ground. And meanwhile, they can continue to sell gas and oil. Anyway, I don't want to belabor that point, but.
Well, no, I think I agree with you and almost everybody I know, because, we both travel in very limited circles. I don't meet people that I disagree with. Somehow it doesn't happen as much as it used to. But so all of my friends agree with me on everything. And I suspect you're sort of the same way. But yeah, I agree. We're not doing things fast enough. I'm with this Greta girl, like, your house is on fire, stupid, get up, and ours is on fire, and I don't see the reaction to it. Anything like, I mean, maybe Bill Gates can joggle people's awareness. I don't know. He didn't get us aware of the problem of pandemics in time, but he's got a new book out where he's saying, that, in 50 years, the global warming problems are going to make our pandemic look like nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I haven't read his whole book. I've read parts of it, and I've heard him speak, and I must say I agree with most of his ideas. I think he's on target, and he's certainly right about the urgency. And maybe he's got the clout. He's certainly got the money to. Maybe he can help get people to wake up. And I'm very pleased that President Biden's getting back into the Paris Treaty. We need to do that.
Mhm.
But we need to start immediately. That's the key thing. We need to start cutting down on greenhouse gas emission. That'll buy time for perfecting some of these other solutions. And the risks from the concentration of greenhouse gases we have in the atmosphere today, and the fact that Earth's temperature has risen now almost 1.2 degrees centigrade, and the oceans are 0.8 degrees centigrade warmer than they've ever been. Problems are happening right now. Some people say, well, I don't see anything, nothing happening to me. But if you go around the world, you look at rising sea levels, ocean warming, fish migration pattern changing, ocean currents changing, affecting weather over the entire globe, melting glaciers and sea ice. I mean, in Canada, was it August, the Milne ice shelf lost 43% of its area, broke off and floated away.
Which ice shelf was that?
It's called, I believe it's called the Milne Milne.
Okay, I didn't know about that.
Check that out and see if I'm
Yeah.
right about that. In 2 days, this huge chunk of it broke off. That's in the Arctic. A few days ago in the Antarctic, we lost a big hunk of Pine Island ice shelf, an area, I think they said it was the size of New York City, 420 square miles. And earlier, 2 years ago, we lost part of the Larsen Sea ice shelf. That was an iceberg the size of Rhode Island or Delaware, I don't remember, some huge thing, which is still floating around somewhere, headed towards some part of Antarctica where they don't want it to go. But so these things are happening. It's wishful thinking to think that they're not happening. It's just nature. We can't do anything about it.
Now you're an engineer.
Yes.
And, you know, there's this word that is almost a dirty word called geoengineering. And, you know, I say the word and then I run for cover because my friends start throwing tomatoes at me or something because they say don't do anything that risky. Well, there are a lot of things that could be done that we're pretty damn sure would have a lot of big effects. But it's true that they may have some effects we hadn't thought of, as well as the things that we know will happen. And so there are things that are, you know, potentially risky, but I'm at the point where I think doing nothing is the worst thing that we could be doing. Almost, you know, there are a number of things. I don't know about spraying sulfur in the stratosphere, but I'm ready to sprinkle iron filings in the ocean, at least on a pretty big, you know, experimental basis, you know.
Yeah, I've read about a number of so-called geoengineering theories, and I think the majority of them, I wouldn't say they're crackpot ideas. I guess I would say they're speculative and they're risky. Something like iron filings in the ocean, that's something that could be tested.
It has been tested. They've done it down by Antarctica, and they did it again off the coast of British Columbia.
Okay, so there's an example of something that would make sense because you can test it, you get some, you start squirting stuff in the atmosphere, and I tell you, I would worry a lot about that. There's no way you can predict what's going to happen. We can't even model the weather that accurately, you know. So the possibility of doing something damaging to me is as great as the possibility of doing any good. So I'm worried. I would be worried about things that involve injecting massive amounts of something into the atmosphere and hoping it's going to blow around the globe and block the sunlight. And yeah, what if it blocks the sunlight and all the plants die? Anyway, I don't want to go into that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is one of the concerns, you know, you could filter out, you know, 2 or 3% of the sunlight, and then what would happen to your crops?
Right. What would happen to crops? What would happen to climate? Some areas are going to get colder. Well, anyway, but I think I'd like to I don't want to cut this off, but I do want to conclude one thing, and that is I think we're at a crossroads. And I'm sure you would agree with this. We're headed down a road that one option is we turn off this road and we start drastically cutting emissions. The other is that we continue to forge ahead down the road we're on right now. And we're going to head right into a future that's uncertain, but likely, unpleasant. And it will be very difficult to do something about it the further down the road we go. Mm-hmm. That's my conclusion.
Well, unfortunately, it's my conclusion too. And it's one that I reached a number of years ago, but you know, what do you do? How do you get other people excited when the human tendency is to say, well, you know, I saw this thing in the New York Times about a month ago that just really curled my hair and it worried me so much. they had this great big article about how wonderful global warming was for Russia, because it was going to make all of this land available for farming that can't be farmed now.
Right.
Huge amount of land there. Well, that's true. But how would it make that land available? By melting the permafrost. And
Yeah.
what happens when you melt the permafrost?
Oh, yeah. Right.
Nobody even thought of that. The whole article, it was like, big article. And I thought, you nut? Don't you know better than to be celebrating a thing like that? I mean, the whole point is to keep that cold if we can, as cold as we can. So, and I don't know. I'm keen to try all kinds of weird things, like trying to include raising bison in the Arctic, so as to keep the
Well,
cold.
I read those papers by that Russian gentleman, and
Did you?
it's very interesting what he's suggesting, and that makes sense to me. That you could reduce the probability of melting permafrost and continue to contain the huge amounts of methane that are trapped under the permafrost. We don't want that to get out into the atmosphere. Absolutely not. There's some of it happening right now. There's some places where methane is leaking out and catching fire.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's better for it to catch fire than for it to get out without catching fire. Because if it catches fire, you got CO2, right? The result.
Yeah, good point.
It's better than methane. So if we could even get up there and set fire to everything, it would be better than letting it just seep out.
But there again, you might reach a tipping point where you're doing
right.
Fire is warms enough that more methane.
Well, yes, but what are we going to do? Because it looks like it's coming out now, and that's the real question: is how much is coming out, and how if it comes out in one big gush, then. This one guy, Wadhams, that I interviewed a few weeks ago, said if 8% of it came out in a big explosive amount, that would increase the Earth's global temperature by 1.4 degrees centigrade. And of course, that means that the other 92% would immediately get out too. And it would be an extinction event. It wouldn't just be humans dying off, but, practically everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, faced with, and they don't know how long it'll last or how long or when it could happen. Could happen anytime now. There are holes. Have you read about these holes in I guess they're in North America too, in Canada, but I've never heard anybody say so. Because most of this carbon is in Siberia. It's not in Canada. I don't know about even Alaska, but Siberia has huge deposits of underground, permafrost and under the sea as well, the Siberian Sea, and it really can't. There are places in Siberia where they see a perfectly circular lake. People don't go places every time, but so they keep running into these things. Perfectly circular lake. And why? What happened there? It was an underground explosion, and this was a crater which has filled up with water. And there are a whole bunch of them. So what happens is apparently some people have even heard them explode, and they could be, a mile wide.
So these are underground explosion
deposits of methane or something.
Yeah.
I presume it's methane.
I hadn't heard about that, but I'm not surprised. Let's put it that way.
About 5 years ago, there was a conference here, and a guy from Russia came and showed pictures of these things. There's a name for them, but I don't remember the name. I wouldn't even know how to look it up. But it's, it's scary. Well, okay, I've scared you and you scare me, and now let's go out and scare some other folks if we can. I say, who are you going to scare next? You've been giving lectures and you're frightening people, and they give you checks for $1,000 to Stop
That
scaring them.
that was following one of our talks, a short talk to a local community group. And my golly, this next day, my co-author received a call from one of the people who had been listening to us. And she said, I really admire what you guys are trying to do. I'm going to send you $1,000 so you can donate your book to schools. We had mentioned it. That was one of our objectives, is to donate books to school. So we've been doing that. And I just got a note from today, actually, from Punahou School, a famous private school in Hawaii. And they said, yes, we'd love to have a few books for our science department. The reason why we think this is important is because it's not that you and I read a book like this. It's we've got to get kids in middle schools and high schools. They're the ones that are going to be affected by it. I hate to say it, but you and I are going to be long dead. They're the ones that are going to be affected by it. They're the ones that need to know the importance and lead some action to start solving the problem. So we're gratified that we're getting the word out. I recently found out that our book is in 160 libraries around the world.
Perfect.
20 or so different countries. So,
well, also the young ones are the ones who are most receptive, as I understand it. They're not particularly interested in a lot of all the issues that I'm interested in, like global, nuclear weapons and so on. But they apparently are very much ahead of us when it comes to global warming. I love the idea that some of them have gone to court and said, sued the government for not taking proper care of them in their own future.
yeah.
I don't know whether they'll ever win a case like that, but bless their hearts, it's maybe an angle that we should all try. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Metta.
It's always fun talking to you, Craig, and we'll have another session one of these days.
All right. You take care. Stay healthy. And stay
Yeah,
well.
you too. Take care. Bye.